Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for coming. So the diverse political views represented here today reflect the unusual consensus in this very polarized political moment against investor-state dispute settlement in general and the sense it needs to come out of NAFTA in specific. And it also represents how isolated the corporate lobby is in its extremely strident defense of ISDS and opposition to the proposals put forward by the administration to roll back these extreme corporate rights. ISDS was only first ever included in the U.S. trade agreement during NAFTA. It was a radical experiment in using the brand free trade to implement a set of corporate privileges and literally a restructuring of power in the global economy that has no passing resemblance to the reduction of border taxes or opening of quotas that were the agenda of traditional free trade agreements. ISDS elevates individual companies to equal status with an entire sovereign nation state. It makes it less risky and expensive for firms to offshore jobs, and it empowers corporations to attack domestic policies by going to tribunals of 3 private arbitrators, frequently corporate lawyers, who can order unlimited sums of compensation to be paid by a country's taxpayers. In all 3 features, extraordinary, and we will make the case very strongly, a bad idea in this NAFTA experiment. So now, almost 25 years later, there have been just under NAFTA, almost $400 million in damages paid out under investor-state attacks against toxic bans, zoning rules, water regulations, timber policies, and an array of other policies for which compensation simply would not have been available under the domestic laws of any of the countries, but largely even under the domestic, very, very robust property protections of the United States. In the context of this broad consensus against ISDS, the corporate lobby is screaming in defense of it as if what was being attacked was something natural and normal versus a radical power grab that was inserted into these agreements thanks to there being a lot of corporate advisors at the table, a closed process, and no role for the public to actually shape the agreements. So the improbable consensus against ISDS shows how very isolated the corporate lobby is in trying to defend these special privileges. And even perversely, while the Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, and others are on the warpath against the notion that they should be denied these outrageous privileges slipped into NAFTA, you even have the American Auto Policy Council in their testimony to the ITC on NAFTA renegotiation noting that ISDS was unnecessary and moreover dangerous to include in NAFTA because it was so controversial. Indeed, following the TPP debate, the issue has been elevated in public discourse. 400,000 signatures to a petition delivered to the administration a couple weeks ago about taking ISDS out of NAFTA. But well before that, there has been a broad consensus against. Before turning to our next speaker, I just want to review how broad, which is the National Conference of State Legislatures, representing the legislatures of the 50 states, Puerto Rico, and the other territories, have had a position against ISDS for a decade, through the entire period of Republican majority control of the legislatures. This was not a leftist thing. This was 50 state legislatures in consensus taking a position. The U.S. Association of Attorneys Generals of the states have had, NAG, have had a position starting warning against NAFTA at the time of the fast-track debate that ISDS would be problematic. The National Association of Counties, the National League of Cities, they all have raised the severe threat to their regulatory policy space and to constitutional order and federalism of ISDS. Small business organizations, most recently last month, 2 of the major ones, sent out letters asking the administration to take ISDS out of NAFTA. Not just small business organizations, but unions. Yes, 2 groups that normally fight, united taking out ISDS from NAFTA. And stark criticism on ISDS has come from, in the legal front, none other than Supreme Court Justice Chief Roberts in a dissent, and the likes of Senator Elizabeth Warren, progressive former Harvard Law School professor, environmentalists, and think tanks like Cato that are on the more conservative side of the spectrum. Republican members of Congress recently in a letter to the administration saying take ISDS out of NAFTA, and for decades Democrats, which is to say there is everyone saying let's get rid of ISDS, which is now joined by numerous countries exiting the system, including South Africa, Indonesia, India, following on the exit from many Latin American countries. And then, on the other hand, you have the corporate lobby. I will just end by sending people to the attention of a letter being released today by 230 law professors and economics professors, including a lot of professors who supported NAFTA in the first instance, not the least of which are some that worked very hard to pass it, like Secretary Reich of that era, the Labor Secretary under Clinton, who is now a professor at Stanford, as well as folks like Joe Stiglitz. This letter really lays out the breadth of intellectual opposition in academia to this regime, and I will simply draw folks to, in the news release, in your nifty and ISDS swag bag. By the way, that's from Public Citizen. No one else at this table takes association with that. We're the only ones who do gimmicks like pens and stickers. But in that bag, you'll see a news release that includes a quote from Joe Stiglitz about how ISDS promotes offshoring and subsidizes the wrong behavior. That is very similar to what you will find in this Fortune op-ed by Dan Ikenson, that is also in the bag. Forbes, sorry, not Fortune, Forbes. That is also not dissimilar from the piece you will see in the Washington Post from Joe Biden's former chief economist, Jared Bernstein, which is to say a broad consensus. Thank you very much.